Guys, welcome to the Sports Gambling Education Webinar number 2, which is our featured guest today is Cynthia Hays of Betfred USA Sports. This webinar is brought to you by sportsgamblingeducation.com. So I want to thank a couple of the partners there. First off, I want to thank Jim Kahler and his staff at Ohio University and the AECOM Center for Sports Administration. Also certainly want to thank Matt Holt and his team at U.S. Integrity. And finally, my team here at Sina Education Services. So just a quick reminder, the first 2 courses are live now. So we are offering a 3-course master certification from Ohio University. And the first 2 courses are now live and available. The first one, Sports Gambling Awareness, a 360 perspective, really speaks to a full picture of the legalized sports gambling industry here in the U.S., including all stakeholders, issues of integrity, the legal history, and where it is going in the future of this landscape. The second course, Analyzing Sports Gambling Integrity Challenges, really speaks to a lot of the concepts, challenges, and issues surrounding institutions, colleges, leagues, and universities. And our third course of that 3-course master's certification is coming this fall. So stay tuned at sportsgamblingeducation.com. Just for attending today's webinar, all attendees today, you can use the discount code WEB812. That's for today's date, August 12th, and today's webinar. So again, WEB812 for 25% off of any course or course bundle. Valid now through August, at sportsgamblingeducation.com. So without further ado, I would like to turn it over to today's moderator, Jim Kahler. Jim is the Director of Sports Gambling at Ohio University. You know, he is an OU alumnus himself and returned to his alma mater as initially as the executive director of the Center for Sports Administration back in December of 2005, after developing successful collegiate and corporate programs at Arizona State University, Riverfront Coliseum, the St. Louis Arena, and with the Cleveland Cavaliers. Jim is one of the only sports business professors in the country who has over 20 years of practical experience in the field, as well as over 10 years of experience in academia. So I'd like to turn it over to Jim Kahler.
Thanks, Scott, and I appreciate all the hard work that you're doing at Cyanna to help us produce these webinars. But I'm going to get going right away, but we've got 2 special guests and one that I have something in common with. I'll share in a little bit and with Cynthia, but we're excited to have really 2 of the brighter minds in the sports gambling industry with Cynthia Hays and Matt Holt. I'm going to start with Cynthia, but she's the Vice President of Compliance with Betfred USA Sports. And if you're not familiar with that company, by the end of this webinar, you'll have a much greater feel. And Cynthia, Betfred was in the news not too long ago with the Denver Broncos. But before you get to the update on the Broncos, why don't you just tell our attendees a little bit about your background and your role with Betfred and what Betfred is all about.
You bet. So I've been in the gaming industry mostly doing regulatory compliance for 20 years now. So this is my first foray into sports betting, but I have a lot of experience on compliance side by working at Caesars. I also worked for Scientific Games, started there, so I've got some good experience on both the operator side and the manufacturer side. And if you know anything about gaming compliance, you really have to know how both of those sides work together, because they have to come together to fit all of the regulations. So my broad-based experience kind of puts me in a unique position to be able to understand both the system side, which is your platform, but then also the operational side and all the other things that go with that, along with, licensing, compliance, integrity monitoring, all of that. Betfred USA Sports is new to the United States. We established ourselves here last year. We have our U.S. headquarters are down near the Las Vegas Strip. Betfred is a wholly owned subsidiary of Betfred Sports out of the United Kingdom. And while Betfred is not a household name here yet, Betfred UK has more than 1,500 retail betting shops, and they also have a very robust online platform in both Spain and the UK. From a U.S. footprint perspective, we are live with retail and online in Iowa, and we are live with retail in Colorado, soon to be live online by the end of this month in Colorado. And then pending regulatory approval, we have signed a deal to have a first presence on the Las Vegas Strip, just off the Strip at the new Virgin Sportsbook. So we are doing everything we can to get our name out there. The Broncos sponsorship was huge for us. We want to do good in the communities where we are serving. We also just signed an agreement to host the Stanford International, so we will be the sponsor of that. That's a big golf tournament that will happen in Sioux Falls later this month. And some of the people in that include John Daly, Vijay Singh, Anshel Carrera, and more. So, you know, we're really trying to attach the Betfred name to the communities where we do business, and we try to be a good partner, not only with our casino partners, but also with chambers of commerce and all of that. So we're kind of taking a bullish approach on sponsorship because we do want Betfred USA Sports to become a household name.
Good, and we know later on we're going to talk about where we are with states and the number of states that have legalized gambling, where they are in the legislation. But we're hoping to have you in Ohio before you know it. So
I'd love to be back in Ohio.
And I'm proud to let our audience know that your son just graduated from our fine university at Ohio University. So we were pleased to have him as one of our rising stars. Okay, let's go over to Matt. Matt, I found a new photo for you on Google Images, but I kind of like that one. Maybe it's from another show that you on. But Matt Holt is the President and CEO of U.S. Integrity, and we are so fortunate to have you as our partner as we launch this whole sports gambling education program. So for some of our audience that really haven't heard your background, Matt, a little bit about your background, how you got to where you are, and what U.S. Integrity is all about.
Sure. So I've spent my entire post-collegiate career in sports betting. So almost 20 years now just in regulated sports betting in the United States. Had the opportunity to work for a company, Cantor Gaming, which at the time launched the first regulated mobile sports betting app in the entire United States, which was, we were kind of a trailblazer in that sense. Spent quite a bit of time there, and also was the chief operating officer of their sister company, CG Analytics, as well, a licensed information service provider in the state of Nevada, where we handled odds creation, game integrity, and some compliance-related services for Cantor. And in doing so, we worked with, the NHL, NFL, NBA, Pac-12, Big 12, all these leagues, and I had the opportunity, with the understanding that PASPA was going to be repealed in Q2 or Q3 of 2018. We raised some private funding from some great groups like 76 Capital, and with the knowledge that there is going to be a need and a demand for truly independent, unbiased, technology and data-driven compliance, fraud prevention, and game integrity services in the regulated sports betting industry. And we've been fortunate enough to, work with such great partners as the NBA, the Pac-12, the Big 12, the SEC, the University of Pittsburgh, Penn State University, and operators, great operators like Betfred and William Hill and Monarch and U.S. Bookmaking and Superbook, which is such a popular brand here as well. And then regulators in 13 different states. So, we're really excited about the regulated sports gaming space, and, excited to be on here with Cynthia.
Okay, so today's webinar is really a number of questions that have come from the students that have already completed our courses. And one of the value adds to being a student is that it's not just one class. What we're trying to do is create a community here where, as legislation changes and more states come on board and more things are happening that we're bringing our students up to the latest in real time. So let's get started with question number one. Will existing sports arenas or stadiums eventually become sports books? So I jumped ahead a little bit with some of the graphics I threw on the screen, but Cynthia or Matt, who wants to get this discussion going?
Do you want to go, Cynthia?
Sure. Yeah. So, I think that they will. And I think there's already laws enabled that allow that in Illinois, Virginia. And you think about not just sports arenas or stadiums either. So think about NASCAR, think about horse racing tracks. So I think that, depending on how the laws all get written and played out in the different jurisdictions, there could be many places that turn into sports books that you wouldn't necessarily think would be.
Cynthia, just to add on that a little bit, one of the things that we're really stressing in our courses is that one size does not fit all. So you have to be an expert on 50 different states as they start to come on board. So we may see some states being more liberal in this area than others, but
Yep.
The one that I threw on the screen, maybe Matt, you might want to talk about, but William Hill seems to have a unique relationship with Monumental Sports, and the owner of Monumental, Ted Leonsis, is very, very much out there from a sports owner's perspective and being progressive. Matt, you want to talk a little bit about that and just your thoughts about what our arenas and stadiums are going to look like in the future?
Sure, and I think, the Leonsis family is they get all the headlines for this, but don't forget the New Jersey Devils have a betting lounge in their arena now, and, the Denver Broncos are setting up a betting lounge in that stadium, and, there's a lot of opportunities for sports leagues to participate now on without participating in the actual revenue of gaming, not taking a rev share, but setting up, space where people can have kiosks available, or they can have lounges where you can have people come up and through the use of an iPad or mobile device help you sign up for an account, fund that account, and be able to place wagers in an area in the stadium while you're watching the event or in the arena. And we're already seeing that now, and that's the first iteration, is promotional corporate sponsorships in the stadium and arenas, and the idea and availability that we could potentially have kiosks in the arena or areas where you could place a bet or sign up and fund a mobile account, and then from your seat be able to place bets while you watch the event. I think this is just the first iteration. As we continue to go, we're going to see much more deeper corporate sponsorships and partnerships between some of these great regulated operators and some of the sports leagues. And then I think there's also some possibilities for some potential revenue sharing in some certain unique situations. And I think what COVID has probably taught us, and especially at the collegiate level, is things that we probably never thought we would see: sports betting corporate partnerships in some of these collegiate arenas. But I think COVID may help expedite that. And at the end of the day, I think everyone agrees, and the studies prove that regulated sports betting is better, safer for everybody. Sports betting's happening anyway. Let's transition all to a regulated, transparent marketplace. And at the end of the day, there's a lot of opportunities for some really unique partnerships, not just in the professional space, but in the collegiate space as well.
Okay, let's go to number two. This one, we got a couple of questions that really focused on amateur sports. One of our students probably has a background with COSIDA, but he or she said in the 70s, COSIDA did not allow SIDs to cooperate with publications, LaStreet and Smith, because they contain ads from gambling companies. I think they probably have lightened up since then, but I would liken this, and we'll get into both these questions in a second. When I first went into the NBA in 1991, we weren't allowed to do any sponsorships with casinos or sports gambling. By the time I left in 2002, David Stern sold a WNBA team to a casino. So, right now, I'd like to get your insights on really the relationship. Maybe question two here is it's more appropriate. Can casinos and sports betting books advertise in college sports facilities? And what could their future role be as an Olympic sponsor, or do either of you see that happening?
I think the first question is, and it takes some regulators to help enforce this, but I think ads and advertising is fine by sports books and sports teams in publications where there's both regulated sports book ads and sports ads in general. The one thing I will say is we need those ads to be for regulated sports books. At the end of the day, these need to be people that are regulated, have the proper monitoring and integrity in place. Age verification, all the KYC compliance related services that come, and consumer protections that come in the regulated market. So I think as long as these ads are for legal regulated books, then that part is absolutely perfectly fine.
Great. So Cynthia, as Betfred starts to grow your brand in the United States, right now is college sports off limits because of the NCAA, or have you really dug into that area yet?
We're just getting started, so we haven't really dug in. Obviously we're going to take the lead from the sports programs themselves as to what we attempt to do and where we could get in with a school like that. It's interesting because it was all about the sin, right? Gambling was a sin, and that's why you didn't want to tie. That's why the leagues didn't want to tie their names to betting parlors or any gambling whatsoever. So, I think that's changing. I think that, as we talk about regulation and as people start to understand just how highly regulated we are, I think that will continue to morph to be more of a friendly opportunity.
Right. Matt,
Sam Boyd Stadium right now, last year during the football games in 2019, there were advertisements for William Hill along the outside. So that it's not when it's going to happen, it's already happening. It's when is it going to happen on a widespread basis amongst the major Power 5 universities across the country.
So with that being said, it's really a university to university decision if UNLV is already doing it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go on to the other one. I wanted to, we're getting a lot of questions about job opportunities around the space. And I told you earlier that Cynthia and I shared a common bond, but we're both members of the Cleveland Cavaliers Alumni Association, having both worked there. And remember, the Cavs are the first championship in Cleveland in 50 years. So that's a pretty good alumni association to be part of it. But the question is, do you feel sports teams will eventually hire individual employees to enforce sports betting integrity? Matt, let's start with you there, because you understand the integrity side from a service provider. But do you think they're going to be hiring somebody that you'll connect with, or will that just be part of somebody else's job?
So I can tell you that on the professional level, that's already in place. Most of the professional leagues, especially the league level, they already have people in place. And even at the college conference level, they already have people in place. I think the next step is to go down from that league and that conference level to the individual team, individual university level, where they also all need to have somebody in place. Because at the end of the day, if you're an individual team, those players are your employees, those coaches are your employees, those trainers and equipment managers that could get caught up in potential misuse of insider information issues, they're your employees. You're the one where if you don't have an integrity officer and you don't have an integrity firm, that's where you're going to end up spending billable hours on attorneys and private investigators, where if you had an integrity directed employee working with an integrity firm, a lot of those costs and risks could be alleviated.
Cynthia, going back to your former role with the Cavaliers with sponsorship and sponsor activation, now with Betfred, your company's going to have a liaison with each team that you sponsor, and those people better be up to speed on rules and regulations. Otherwise, you're going to be giving them a quick call from the compliance standpoint, correct?
Yeah, they're not going to want to hear from me. No, we do. We have to be very careful, and we have to make sure that, when you're going through your sponsorships, you got to make sure that you're doing the right thing, and you got to make sure that, the activation is right. You've got to have a good relationship with the team. There's got to be a good understanding of who's going to be responsible for what, and then also what the do's and don'ts are around that and around that relationship. So, for example,
what are the consequences if one of your partners were to get you into trouble by doing something that they didn't know any better about? I mean, like in the liquor industry, you can lose your liquor license for a period of time. So what type of consequences would a company like Betfred face if the Denver Broncos were to offer a promotion that they shouldn't have been offering?
So it's tough, right? So we're licensed. And so there are actions that can be taken against your license. I would assume that the regulators would definitely open up an investigation, and we would figure out, what happened, where was the breakdown. I also would assume that there would be some level of fairness, that, Betfred wouldn't automatically be sent a notice of violation or have their license revoked because of something they weren't aware of.
Right.
The regulators are very fair when it comes to investigating and applying, those standards. So I don't think that we're going to run into much of that. I really don't.
Yeah, and teams usually have to write it all up for the leagues to sign off on, so they're going to have you proof it before it goes up to the league level. All right, let's go to the next question. Must have a rugby executive in our first class, but I'd love to get your collective insights here as we prepare to launch the National Rugby Football League. What tips and suggestions do you have for us as it relates to sports gambling?
So there's been studies that show that a person that places a wager on an event, regardless if that wager is $2, $5, $20, $5,000, a person with a wager, a stake on the event they're watching, are 8 times more likely to watch that event than someone who doesn't have a wager on the event. Thus, there's so many studies and correlation that show if you can engage with the betting community and with the operators and the bettors, then people are more likely to watch your events. If they're more likely to watch, if they enjoy it and have a good fan experience, then they're more likely to attend, they're more likely to buy merchandise, you're more likely to get better TV contracts the next time those come up. So as you're preparing to launch, one of the things I would suggest is meeting with the local regulators, supplying them or an integrity firm like ours or the operators directly all the information they would need to be able to get wagering on your sport approved. What television networks, what streaming services do you have set up? What are all the rules? So that if the sportsbook operators want to take wagers on it, they have all the information they need to comfortably do so to get that wagering approved and then see if there's an appetite with the bettors. If you don't provide this data and this relevant information as a new league to the operators, then how are they going to be able to take wagers on it if they don't know the rules and the governing body and the sources of information? And if you're not getting wagering on your events in 2020, you're probably not experiencing the same exponential growth that you would if you added engagement with the wagering communities.
Matt, any insights on historically how popular rugby has been as a sport from a sports gambling perspective?
So I can tell you this, we had rugby sevens, and Cynthia knows this. We had rugby seven tournament here in Nevada for years and years and years. And despite the fact that attendance was always pretty good at the event, that wasn't really televised and it wasn't distributed that much locally because there wasn't wagering on it. And I don't think at the time the rugby groups ever went out of their way to engage with wagering, and now it's not even here anymore. They moved it to LA. And one of the reasons was they cited a lack of engagement here. But I think one of the potential mistakes they may have made was they had a potential audience. They had people that were familiar with rugby. They didn't engage the sportsbook operators at all in terms of wagering. And again, if people watch the games they bet on.
All right, so I want to go back to something you said and ask another question to Cynthia. But like if I'm in my old job at the Cavaliers and I know that Ohio is going to come on board, Matt, you said meet with the regulators. Like, how open are the regulators going to be to meet with somebody that is in a state that is just getting going? So Cynthia, you deal with a lot of the regulators. Is that a easy meeting to get, or do you think you're going to be calling them 15 times before you get through the door?
I think it depends on the state. But, there's a lot of politicking that happens around sports betting and gambling regulation and, just making connections. But if you reached out to a regulatory authority, you've got you're going to start this league. And if you reached out to them and said, what information will I need to be able to provide in order for us to be able to offer this sport in your sports betting catalog, the regulators are likely going to meet with you. The other thing that is becoming very clear is they really want to make sure that all of these leagues and all of these teams do have integrity monitoring in place. So I think as you prepare to launch a new football league, find out who the best integrity monitoring service is. I know who I think is. When we happen to have him on the line here. But deal with a service like that, because they also can open doors for you. That's the other thing. If you're talking to an integrity monitoring service, that integrity monitoring service likely has connections with the regulators already and can help broker that conversation.
Yeah. And try to find one that's conflict free, but maybe Matt can talk about that a little bit later on. We'll come back. Just hanging out with you in Las Vegas and hearing some of the stories that you are allowed to speak about, some you are not. And then we're going to go to you first and then Cynthia, but can you share any insights or stories about some of the more famous and well-known sports gamblers? And there's public stories, books, movies out there on this. And Matt, you've been around this industry your whole career. So give us a story or two that our audience might find interesting.
Sure. So, we're not allowed to talk about basically bettors, it's part of our confidentiality unless they make this information public. One of our most famous bettors at Cantor was Floyd Mayweather, who used to tweet his tickets. Coincidentally, Floyd only tweeted out his winning ticket, so he's undefeated on social media, undefeated in the boxing ring and undefeated in sports betting if you just looked at the bets he posted. But those kind of bettors, when they're that high profile, they can also mess with your risk a little bit. Obviously, we don't ever think they have inside information or trying to manipulate an event. But when you get someone that's such a big celebrity, that's so rich, the amount of money they want to wager to get that same excitement and thrill is massive. And we would literally have Floyd Mayweather come in on a college football game. Hey, I want to bet $1 million on Oregon or something. And you want to accommodate. It's always been the premise and the model of the casinos to accommodate these celebrities, to accommodate these big whales the best you can across all the different casino platforms. But in some of these events, on like an NBA game, the Wednesday night NBA game, you might have $50,000 of handle on the game and somebody comes in and wants to bet $500,000. I mean, you're completely tilted. And what makes it interesting from a risk perspective is these celebrities don't usually bet routinely every day. So if you come in and you accept $1 million bet from some of the more famous celebrity bettors like Floyd or Charles Barkley or Bruce Willis, they're not going to come in every day. So over the time, look, if they were betting $1 million every day, then that would be fine for the book because you're going to have your ups and downs, but it's okay. But when you just give them one time $1 million on a game or something, it can certainly tilt your risk and it can have a real important impact on your monthly and weekly finances.
So, Cynthia, question for you, Cynthia, like if I were to come into a lot of money and I went into Betfred, is there certain standards where like that bet's a little high? We're gonna have to turn that one down. So how as an organization, where do you draw the line on the size of the bet?
It goes back to maximum payouts, right? So you've got your households and you've published your maximum payouts. And then if you've got somebody who wants to come in and place a bigger wager than that, our trading team would evaluate that. Is this a one-time only? As Matt pointed out, one-time onlys can really hurt you. Is this a known player? Is this somebody that we're willing to take a little more risk on because they're in the book all the time and they bring their friends and they're a good player and they're a known player. So it really does come down to case by case.
Yeah. And Matt, the guy in the upper left-hand corner, I forget his name, but he got a lot of publicity because he won $1.7 million on Jeopardy. But he's a professional gambler, so I can't even remember his name, but he must be big out there in the gambling circles.
Big Game James. Yeah, look, we've dealt with some of the biggest bettors in the world, and Cynthia's probably seen them, from famous bettors like Billy Walters. Billy Walters, who did the 60-minute special. He's probably the most famous sports bettor in the history of our industry. And then we've dealt with celebrity bettors, again, especially around events like the Super Bowl or anytime there's a big event in town and you get these celebrities, especially in a city like Las Vegas. When you host books in major cities like Cynthia does and Denver area or Las Vegas, you're going to have celebrities roll in, and it becomes a challenge because you always want to accommodate the celebrities, the social media, the media that comes along with taking a huge bet from a celebrity. But again, because it's a one-time bet, a lot of times it really can put your risk upside down on a particular sport in a particular week. And you have to be careful sometimes. And and you have to make sure that you're doing all the right protocols in place.
Right. Thank you. By the way, we were talking about Billy Walters the other day, but if some of our listeners get a chance to go to YouTube, 60 Minutes, really interesting documentary that I think you would enjoy. Okay, what's your estimate? And this is specifically on Florida, so I did some research, but someone in the class wanted to know, hey, what's going down in Florida? So I put some stats up there, but one of the things I saw, like in Florida, Cynthia, it's a big negotiation with the Seminole tribe, and depending on the state and the casinos and who controls it, in some states you were telling me there could be multiple tribes that are involved with the casinos, which probably makes your life a little bit more challenging.
Right. So when you think about sports betting, right, people start thinking about Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Nevada, and the places where it's been up and running the longest. But what people don't understand is you also have every individual Indian tribe is their own regulatory authority. So when you're talking about regulated gaming, which sports betting, it falls under, is part of, you don't have just state regulators, you have tribal regulators. And so you really have to do your research, and you really have to know, what tribe are you dealing with, and then you need to get close to them so that you can understand their regulation. Because I know that you have some other questions in here later, Jim, about where do I go to find the regulations, and how do I know if I need a brick and mortar casino in order to offer sports betting? And it really can be all over the board.
Right.
So, and the first, you also need to understand what are the licensing requirements, because getting a license to operate sports betting is not necessarily a painless process.
And it's not an inexpensive process either.
That is correct.
Yeah.
That is correct. It can be millions of dollars.
Right. So I want to pivot on this question because we get a lot of questions on, hey, where are the other states? So I was able to, this is as of July 2020, and Cynthia, thanks for sending it along.
You're
and
welcome.
It shows where we're live. The blue is where the law is enacted, and then the gray is pending. And I know in California, which would be a great state for sports gambling, it's still kind of dragging along. So a couple of questions for both of you, but I guess if you're looking into your crystal ball, how long before this entire map is red, if you had to project out?
I don't know that the entire map ever goes red. It's sort of like, what is it? 38 states have lottery, or 40 states have some type of gaming, lottery or casino. And, I don't know that we ever get to 100% red here. There's some states that are historically very anti-gaming, and I don't know that sports betting is going to be the first to break down that barrier. But some of these are moving very rapidly. Like I think Ohio now is in the blue category already, where everything's already been passed and enacted, and they're just waiting now to write their regs, get them approved, and start taking licenses. But some of these states, and with COVID, has expedited some of this in some cases. But I'm surprised how fast. We're basically, 26 months from the May 14th repeal of PASPA, and we're already over 20 states live. And that's just amazing that we're averaging, if you just look at the number of months that have passed since PASPA was repealed and the number of new states that have started taking sports betting, we're almost a new state per month on average. That is unbelievable, the pace in which these states have, and some people are probably saying, no, this is taking so long, I want it in my state. As Cynthia could tell you, as someone who has worked in regulated gaming for a long time, legislation just doesn't change quickly. And the fact that this many states have been able to make this happen this fast is actually really impressive.
So Cynthia, let's build on that a little bit. COVID's going to put some pressure on states for new revenues. So in your experience in following, legislation and all that, is this now moving at warp speed, or what?
This is moving fast, and it's moving incredibly fast for the gaming industry. Getting new technologies into casinos and adding gaming and having it fully regulated, it's not just the enabling law, but then it's all the rules and standards that have to get written after that. So the fact that laws are being enabled, but it seems to be parallel pathing a little bit. So it seems like people are, the states need the money, and so they're thinking about how do we do this, and they parallel path then some of the regulatory requirements at the same time as the law is going through its process. So it really is moving fast.
So Cynthia, if we're at 20 states or so now where it's red, how many of those 20 do you think also adopted online sports gambling in their states? Because I remember doing some research early on where New York said, okay, in the casinos, but we're not ready to go online. And that was music to New Jersey's ears because they were having people come over and bet in New Jersey. So of the states that have legalized it now, are they all getting to online, or are there some bumps and hurdles in the road in that area?
I think they're all moving towards online. I think that, I think that they're seeing the benefit there. And again, you've got a bigger pool of customers if you're doing online as well as just brick and mortar. And it's interesting that you mentioned the New York to New Jersey sports betting tourism that's been occurring up there in the train stations of Hoboken, of all places.
Matt, any insights on, it just seems to me as technology continues to improve, if I'm watching the game and I can just pull out my cell phone, that's where the growth of this industry will come from.
And we have to remember, and you said it right at the start of this entire webinar, that one size doesn't fit all here. People have to write regulations in order that best fit their constituents. So in a state like Tennessee, they don't have any casinos, they don't have the horse tracks, so they went 100% online. But a state like Mississippi, who passed very early in 2018, the whole basis was, let's help drive people to our very large and established brick and mortar casino industry. It was a way to help drive more traffic to an already existing casino space. So I think it's okay if we go state by state and the regulators get all the constituents in that state involved and say, what is the best methodology here for us to create new jobs, create new taxable revenue, and drive people to our existing gaming businesses already. And it's not the same model in every state.
Right. Cynthia, I want to come back to you real quick, but the debate in these states seems to be state lottery or casinos, correct? Like who's gonna be?
It depends. right?
Okay.
So some states, well, for example, Ohio, to my knowledge, that's the one thing that has not yet been decided. Is it going to be the Casino Control Commission that regulates it, or is it going to be the Ohio Lottery Commission that regulates it? And so those decisions have to be made as part of the enabling legislation.
Yeah, and
I heard in Ohio, it's going to be the Lottery Commission that runs, the revenue and the actual operations of gaming, the licensing, and that the Gaming Commission would handle the enforcement, which I actually think is a decent blend.
Oh, that's new. That's new, Matt. I did not hear that.
And that's really why I asked that question, because just reading, in the media what's going on, it seemed that at one time that was what the holdup was. They weren't sure, who the lead person was. So it looks like both will be involved.
Maybe a compromise there.
Yeah. Okay. So careers in this field. We're getting a lot of questions on that. From my perspective, I've started to use Indeed because it's just, it's an aggregator of different jobs. But Cynthia, talk a little bit like if somebody, as you continue to grow in the States, you've got your own, I was able to at least find a graphic for it, but you must have a job career site with your website. But any other advice for people that are looking for jobs in this, vertical, and what kind of experience they might look to get as they're trying to get their foot in the door?
Yeah, it's kind of tough, and it's kind of tough. Of course, it's tougher now, right?
Yeah.
We're still in a pandemic, and a lot of gaming industry consolidation is going on, and so what tends to happen is we tend to find most of our people word of mouth, and through networks of people. Matt and his team, get resumes and they'll send them along to us. A lot of it really is networking at this point. I know that we post our jobs on LinkedIn, and we've had some luck that way. My best advice is, if you want to get into this industry, you're gonna have to be a little bit relentless in marketing yourself and putting yourself out there, because I think right now it's just a tough field because there are so many people out of work.
Right.
So it's really difficult.
So let's pull COVID aside for a second. If someone were to ask you pre-COVID, what other advice and skill sets should I be putting in my toolbox that'll make me a more attractive candidate to your organization or others, what advice would you give them?
I would tell them to get some education. The program that you guys are doing at Ohio University, I think somebody walks in the door with that certification or that type of certification is going to have a leg up, because it's still such a nascent industry. It's still a baby.
Right.
So we still have people who are, learning as they go. I mean, I'm 9 months, 10 months into sports betting. And so I continue to learn as I go as well. But I do think certifications and stuff like that shows not only that you're interested, but you're committed to learning. And then you can bring a skill set, right through the door with you, and you can share your knowledge with the others.
Right. And Matt, until not too long ago, I would tell people, you really want to work in sports gambling, move to Vegas, because there's going to be more opportunities out there. But now, as more states are coming on board, there's going to be more jobs in other states. So what, you've spent your entire career in there, and I'm sure you get this question all the time, but what advice might you impart on a young man or young woman that really wants to get into this segment of the sports business industry?
To Cynthia's point, look, we have a waterfall of people that want to be involved in the industry, and only so many spots right now. So you have to be tenacious. But what I would also tell people is you need to do one or two things to separate yourself. one of which is get the education, get something that other people don't have. I have this certificate, which means my base knowledge is going to be higher than the person with zero base knowledge when we apply and all other things are equal. And number two is, don't be scared to take that 1 year and start at the bottom and do an internship, write tickets at a sports book. Just having 1 year experience in the regulated sports betting environment is also going to give you a leg up on some other folks. So look, you may have to do an extended internship or, do a job that isn't exactly where your end goal is, but willing to start there for a year just to get some regulated sports betting experience. Otherwise, you should probably get some type of education that certification that people that are going to be also applying against you don't have.
Okay. All right. I want to try to move a little quicker because we're going to run out of time, but maybe because of my NBA background, I chose the photo I did. But with sports gambling only just beginning to be implemented across the country, how big of a setback would it be would an integrity violation be to the market? And the closest thing that I could think of as I was, working on this question was like, what if the Donaghy situation would have been widespread in every NBA ref? I mean, that would have brought the league to its knees. But I'd rather, that's just my quick opinion. But I'd like to get both of your opinions because that's the last thing we need.
Look, there's bad guys in every sector of every industry in the entire country, and you're never going to stop that. What we've done in regulated sports betting inside of 30 months of since the repeal of PASPA, we've had regulators recognize that, A, we need more transparency. We need better exchanges of data. Look at the Colorado regulations. Those regulations actually help the operators as well. By doing a little bit of data IT work up front, customer disputes are handled quicker. Integrity issues, suspicious activity reports are handled faster. Then the customer feels better about everything that's happening. He gets back to betting faster. At the end of the day, our goal in regulated sports betting isn't to create $500 billion worth of new sports bettors. It's to take the existing $500 billion that's being wagered in the U.S. prior to 2 years ago illegally and shift those people over to the regulated market where they get better consumer protections, where they get, everything that comes along with regulation, security, everything. So at the end of the day, look, there's going to be integrity issues because in any market that's booming like this, they sent Martha Stewart to prison in the financial services world. It didn't have an effect on the stock market. She just did her time. There's always going to be people trying to take advantage of the system, job the system. But thankfully, the relationship that has been established with the integrity firms like mine, the operators like Cynthia and Betfred, and the great regulators that we have in many of these states, and that whole three-way communication, we are better equipped now to handle these situations than we ever have been in the history of the U.S. when it comes to sports betting integrity issues.
Cynthia, you want to add anything there?
Yeah, I think that, most of the regulators have put in the requirement that you do some sort of integrity monitoring. So in best case, you're gonna see something and you're gonna say something, right, Matt? And you're gonna say this doesn't smell right. This doesn't look good. If there were a big integrity violation, I think the regulators would step back and they would look at their regulations again and just say, was there something else we could or should have done to prevent that?
Right. Now, Cynthia, I want to stay with something that Matt said, but pose the question to you. Colorado did a great job. So you're dealing with different states. Maybe you first, Matt, you can tag it, but what was it about Colorado? They just built a better system as they went online?
It's the exchange of data. Think about how technology changed the Postal Service. So let me give you a quick example and I'll go really fast. Imagine going to the post office 15 years ago when you couldn't find your package. And you'd go to the post office, you'd say, hey, where's my package? You'd wait in line 45 minutes and they'd say, I don't know. and come back in a week, and you'd come back in a week and you still haven't got it and nobody knew where it was. But now you get these tracking numbers with your packages. So you know every single stop it's been, where it is, why it got delayed, and the whole industry has taken a huge advancement from some very small technology. We have the same technology now in sports betting that we have in the financial services market. There's no reason why, if there's an issue or a suspicious activity, why the regulator should have to send an email to the operator, wait to get a response, wait to look at the data. The fact that Colorado is saying if we have access to that data on a real-time basis, then when customer disputes come up, suspicious activity, integrity issues, if they have the tools in front of them already to deal with those issues in a real-time basis, then the customer is happier. So a customer makes a dispute. The biggest complaint in regulated gaming is, oh, they don't care when I have an issue, because it takes so long to finish that customer dispute. It could take months just because you're going back and forth to get all the data you need. If they have all that data in front of them now, which Colorado mandates, well, now those customer disputes can be handled so much faster, and win or lose, the customer is happy because he feels like someone cares what he says, they care about his issues, they addressed it quickly, and now he can get back to playing and having a better relationship with the regulators, a better relationship with the operators in that state, and he's more likely to bet in a regulated framework. That's why, and the technology is simple. There's no reason why we do the same thing we did in 1995, email the operators and ask for the info in 2020. That's why Colorado said, let's take advantage of the technology we have and build a better environment that builds a better customer experience and a better environment and a safer environment for the customers, the operators, and the regulators.
So Cynthia, could you talk, if Colorado is really buttoned up, that's got to make your life a little bit easier from a compliance standpoint?
It does.
Yeah.
No, it does. You don't have as many gray areas where you wonder what did they mean by that. They're pretty prescriptive in what they wrote and what they meant. And the other thing that they did is they had actual workshops with all of the operators and with vendors, and they invited us to sit and to talk through the rules as they wrote them, which is huge. Because then they're getting, being able to be told what really can't work, even though it's written that way in New Jersey, doesn't really work that way. You need to tweak it this way. And they actually listened, and we were able to provide really good input. And I think that just has made the whole process so much easier there.
Okay. We are going to run out of time, so I apologize. But this was a question. I'm very curious about U.S. sportsbook operators' relationships with international gamers. Is it possible, or will it likely become possible, for U.S. sports books to accept wagers from users in Europe? So, Cynthia, I'm going to go with you on this one because you have customers all over the world. So
yeah. So bottom line, for this to ever happen, the Wire Act would have to go away. So sports betting is specifically something that must be done within the state in which the bets are placed. You have to place the bet in the state where it is regulated, which is again why New Jersey is benefiting from New York not having the ability to do online, right? So you have to go and you have to register in that state, but I don't see this as being something that's going to go away, if ever. Because you're not allowed to conduct a wager over state lines.
Gotcha.
And two, you've also got the tribes, and as the tribes come online with sports betting, some of them may make sports betting specific to their own reservations.
Right.
So this is where you have your geolocation services that make sure that you're within the confines of where you're allowed to bet. And so I don't see it.
Okay, I'm gonna race ahead real quick. Just a quick graph there. Somebody asked a question about Europe, but the UK just seems to be way ahead of everybody, and the rest of the world was catching up. But let's quick question: legalization in states lead to the downfall of offshore books, I hope so, because
I think we all do.
yeah. So
There's no player protection.
yeah,
And so much so that some people may be betting illegally and not realize it.
yep.
Yeah.
Which states don't have a brick and mortar requirement to set up an online sports book?
Tennessee.
Tennessee? Okay. So they're unique with that, right?
Yes, because they don't have the brick and mortar casinos or racetracks that these other states have.
Right. But I want to get to this other one for Cynthia. Matt, I'm going to come back to that one. But here's one, because in talking to you the other day, it was interesting. How did Native American casinos tax their sports betting since they're not bound by federal laws? I mean, you have to learn all the intricacies of dealing with the National Indian Gaming Association, I guess would be the...
Well, the National Indian Gaming Commission is actually the regulatory body there. But so as I alluded to before, every Native American tribe is their own regulatory authority. And they have sovereignty, meaning that they get to manage their own destiny, right? So some of the tribes are going to, I don't want to go down too much of a rabbit hole.
Right.
But in order to offer Las Vegas style casino gaming, the tribes have a contract with their states. So each tribe has a contract within their state, with their state, that tells them what they can do and what they cannot do with regards to gambling. If you're talking about traditional Las Vegas style gambling, which is different than gambling games based on bingo, which they're allowed to do. But what we're seeing in sports betting is that some of the tribes are going to open up their compacts with the state so that they can offer sports betting. Some of the tribes, because the compact is such a broad contract with the state, and there are so many concessions and there are so many places where you could end up with unfavorable terms, many of the tribes are not wanting to go that route. They want to leave sort of their compacts where they are with regard to existing gaming. And then I know a couple of places where the tribes are actually pushing for a constitutional amendment as opposed to something that would be specific to those tribes.
Okay. Hey, can I ask you both to stick around for a couple more minutes?
Yeah, I'm good.
And I want to let Scott Shelton do a quick public service announcement on the discount. But then Scott, I'd love to get answers to these questions so we can put it up on our website, because some of the students took the time out to put it on there. So do you want to do a quick message on the discount, and then we're going to try to knock out a couple other quick questions, if that's okay?
Absolutely. And guys, thanks again for taking part in today's webinar. Again, here's Scott Shelton with Siena Education Services. If you are attending today's webinar, please use the discount code WEB812 for 25% off either a single course or the 3-course bundle. Each course does result in a certification from Ohio University's AECOM Center for Sports Administration. And also the 3-course bundle, which again, the first 2 courses are live now, and the third will launch this fall. But the 3-course completion results in a master certification as well. So check it out at sportsgamblingeducation.com. And the slide does say valid through July, but actually it is valid through all the way through the end of August. Okay. And I also want to note, we had a really good question come across our comment section from Sergio Alves. Sergio writes in from Brazil, I believe, and Sergio wrote, other countries are also developing their own regulations. Do you believe the U.S. model will influence countries such as Brazil, or do you see the UK and Europe as setting the international standard? And I believe Matt Casciato started to answer this in the first course, but I will turn this over to our experts.
Yep.
That's a good question. In general, there is less regulation overseas. than there is here. And so companies coming here are being faced with all this regulation, all the licensing requirements, a lot of things that are not as strict. I'm not saying they're not regulated, because that's not what I'm saying at all. But they're not used to the level of detail that the United States gaming regulators tend to get into when they're allowing a new product. I honestly don't know, which model Brazil would take. My guess is it ends up being a little bit of a hybrid. That probably, I think that's how the best models end up occurring. You take a model that worked, but you pick and choose from other jurisdictions and other models the requirements that you think are most important to your particular jurisdiction.
Cool. All right, Matt, if you don't mind, I want to go back to this one right here. How do integrity monitoring services sift through what is real versus what is suspicious when it comes to betting activity on a game? That's an interesting question.
So it starts with building thresholds, parameters, and algorithms in the system that say, if this many bets happen on this event within this little time frame, or this many fouls compared to this many, you build all these algorithms within the event and within the wagering data that flag for abnormalities that need a human to review. So we flagged about 1 out of 1,000 games, a little less, that needed to be reviewed and investigated by humans after that. And then we go through and look at the particular circumstances of each flag, why they happen, why they need to be potentially investigated further. And then when it gets to the point where you really need to get into the granular information, that's where the whole idea of the regulators, the operators, and the leagues and teams all working together comes in. We all could say, look, this is what happened, and this is why it's abnormal, and here's the wagering on it. And now the operators and the regulators, we all know who actually was placing the bets. We can run it through LexisNexis and look, are they the brother-in-law of the referee? Are they the cousin of the quarterback? There's so many things we can identify there. And then if it turns into a criminal investigation, we hand it over to the authorities, whether it be Gaming Control Board, FBI, whoever it is, that actually has the subpoena power to issue the subpoenas and then, if necessary, move forward with prosecution.
Okay, now you said a couple things there that just triggered something, but in terms of putting tools in your toolbox and skills, a lot of kids looking to break into the sports business industry are really strong on the analytics side of the business, but there's only so many jobs out there for Billy Ball, right? And I see your industry on both sides, Cynthia and Matt, that if I'm good in analytics, there might just be a career here for me.
Sure. Oh, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Let's see. We got a couple more here. Do you think there'll be an influx of newer and smaller companies that enter into the sports betting industry? This could be on the information distribution side, and this student uses Daily Wager, or even consulting companies that sell picks for a subscription fee. There are plenty of companies out there that have been selling picks for years, right? So who wants to take a shot at this one?
I can start. I think that there's enough space for everybody in the U.S. regulated sports betting marketplace. And I know somebody asked me a question on a panel like a week or so ago that says, if Penn National and FanDuel or DraftKings are using Kambi right now, is Kambi going to become the preeminent software platform in the United States? And I said, probably not. When you have two customers that big, that eats up a lot of your bandwidth and time and effort. And, when these new, operators or new jurisdictions open, maybe Kambi isn't the right fit because they don't have the prioritization or bandwidth to handle some tribal compacts up in Washington. So I think that again, it's not one size that fits all here. Look, if you're a tribal organization that's usually getting the respect and attention every time you do something, you don't want to wait 9 months for a big platform to get around because Penn National gets the priorities or the DraftKings does. Maybe a smaller platform is the right fit for you. it depends on what's happening. Some people want to do their own marketing, so different people are a different fit. And then on the other side, there's so many different services around the media, the discussion, content around sports betting. I personally feel like the picks side of the business should be regulated a little more, because there's been so many shady people on the side of selling picks and information that handicapper tout business is so tainted at this point that maybe if you put some regulation around it, made them register, and there was some way to really track reliable information, I'd feel a little bit better. But I'm not in love with that side of the business right now. But I think overwhelmingly the sports industry, the regulated sports industry in the United States, as it continues to grow, more and more opportunities continue to evolve.
Cynthia, you and I were talking, it takes a real commitment and an investment to break through. So your company has an advantage where regulated sports gambling is just getting going in the United States. Betfred can play off of everything that you've learned overseas, correct?
That is correct. And for more than, since 1967, big player over there. And we leverage a lot of that knowledge for sure. Big retail player. We like retail. We like having people come in and use the other amenities at our partner casinos and hang out with us in our sports books and have a beer and sit with their friends and watch the games. I mean, we like that. We like that part of it. But we also realize that, mobile is a big play. And so we are going to be players in that market as well. But it's a big commitment. And getting your name out there is tough because there's a lot of noise, because there are a lot of companies that are doing this and a lot of big companies who can really, push their name value through, a lot harder than we can.
Okay. So I'm going to zip ahead. Well, here, there was one question and I did some research. So I'll go quick on this one. Name, image, and likeness law affecting sports betting with college students. And as you might expect right now, the NCAA put this report together in April, and they are recommending that alcohol, tobacco, and sports gambling are not activities that today's student athletes should really get involved with. Now, that's not to say that a state couldn't write their own version of NIL. But as I did the research here, the one thing that I think will happen is we'll have a little fun. I'm a Cleveland person, and Cynthia's got to. Johnny Manziel, Heisman Trophy winner. He would have been all over name, image, and likeness, but burns out in the pros, but still could be closely tied to all of his buddies at Texas A&M. And certain companies would love to, get his insights and pay him. And that, I don't know how the two of you feel, but that, from a regulation standpoint, that'd be a little scary, because he's still wired into all of his former players, right?
Yeah, he probably has insider information that he shouldn't have, if he was going to bet on a sport, right? So something too that I think people would be interested in is you're a prohibited player from betting sports if you are involved in the sport. If you're a player, if you're a coach, if you are somebody who is in a position to exert influence over any of those individuals, or if you are somebody who might have insider information. And so in our terms and conditions, you have to agree that you're not a prohibited person before you're allowed to bet on our platform.
Gotcha.
And those violating that can come with criminal charges. Yeah.
So Matt, out at UNLV, could you see the casinos lining up to get an endorsement deal with the star quarterback or the point guard? Or I think the NCAA is not going to allow that to happen. But what about once the kid's eligibility is off?
I don't know about the students individually yet. I think the first steps are going to be partnerships inside stadiums and arenas for marketing purposes. So being able to market products and services in the regulated gaming space inside arenas, inside stadiums, and it's baby steps with the NCAA. Once everybody's comfortable with that, I think they'll move forward with more stuff. I don't think you're ever going to see a time when it's the Ohio State Betfreds instead of the Ohio State Buckeyes. I don't know that we're going to go there.
Yeah.
But I could see that there being opportunities inside that stadium where there's betting lounges and places designated in that stadium where people could sign up for fund accounts and maybe place some wagers at a kiosk and have some really cool promotional and corporate partnerships and sponsorships. And I think that kind of stuff's coming because let's face it, COVID has put a financial dent in the budgets of the athletic departments across the country.
Absolutely. All right, so Scott, if you're there, I unfortunately, with my dual monitors here, I'm not able to pull up any other questions that might have come in from our audience. But if you want to pull one or two, and then we can go ahead and wrap.
I think we are good to wrap, Jim. That was the final one from the attendee chat. So again, I just want to thank everybody, especially Cynthia Hays at Betfred USA Sports. Cynthia, thank you so much for your time today. And of course, to Jim, our Director of Sports Gambling Education at Ohio University, and Matt Holt, Founder and President of U.S. Integrity. Guys, thank you so much. That was an excellent, excellent webinar.
Thanks everybody.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.